Welcome to MidLife Matters, where we celebrate women's wisdom and wit. I'm Georgian Lussier, your host, and I'm delighted to introduce today's guest, a rock star in the healthcare industry, affectionately known as Maria P. Maria brings over 40 years of experience and contributions in many different areas of healthcare, and she's here to share her story with us. So welcome, Maria.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here. Thank you for inviting me.
Absolutely. Now, we met through the Hospital of Special Care, and you have a very interesting relationship with them, which started back in high school, and you went off on other adventures and came back in a leadership capacity. But what I'd really like to start with is your current passion, which is the program at the New Britain High School for helping to direct people into the healthcare field. So how did that all get started? Tell us the name of it, and let's hear about that.
The New Britain Academy for Health Professions is a smaller learning community at New Britain High School. And it was conceived by the business community in New Britain. In 2008, the superintendent of schools asked the business community to identify what are the graduation requirements for students upon completing high school so that they could become employed. And through the Chamber of Commerce, a survey was sent out to all the businesses, and it turned out that the healthcare sector was the largest growing employment sector. And therefore, they wanted to create a program of study at the high school to introduce students to the healthcare industry. A meeting was held at Mayor's office where the superintendent of schools and the CEOs of the two hospitals in New Britain. There were two hospitals there, Hospital for Special Care and the Hospital of Central Connecticut. They are the anchor hospitals of the healthcare system in New Britain. And through discussion, it was identified that they really wanted to do this program. And so the seed was planted. They began what is now a model academy for not only for New Britain, but for Connecticut as well. There were other high schools coming to visit the health academy and to model the curriculum. A search was started for a project manager, and I was asked if I could help him start the program, and this was November 2009, and here I am 5 years later, and I can't seem to disconnect. I work with the most amazing science teachers who really are passionate about their work and inspire the students every day to come to school, engage them in meaningful work, and really get them excited about the healthcare system. And today, the Health Academy, which is it's known as the Health Academy. Today it has 305 students enrolled in 4 grades in 16 courses. None of us knew what we were doing, but our collective talents came together, and through partnerships with the district and the 2 hospitals, we now have an amazing academy. And it really brings all my skills together as a healthcare professional, and I couldn't be doing anything better than this at this stage of my life, as I am a retired healthcare executive.
And I saw a wonderful article about the program, and the Hospital for Special Care was featured, and you were featured. And it was interesting because I saw that some of the students came to observe and immerse themselves a little bit in the actual environment, such things as observing the aquatic rehab area, the sports programs, wheelchair sports, the role plays, actually sitting in a wheelchair themselves. I mean, it looked like there was a variety of opportunities for the students to really gain different perspectives and speak to staff members.
We have what we call Discover Our Hospital Day.
Oh, nice.
Whereby 10th graders who are sophomores come to the hospital for one day, and they interact with a variety of professionals, especially our rehab team. Most students in New Britain High School don't really know what Hospital for Special Care has to offer. Most people think that when you get sick, you go to the hospital for an operations or to have a baby, or if you're sick, you go to the emergency room. So they come to our hospital to explore that this is a different kind of a hospital. It's a hospital that offers programs and services to patients who have long-term needs. And so they learn the rehab process, and they learn that there are 4 primary team members as the rehab team. Physical therapy, occupational therapy, speech language pathology, and therapeutic recreation. So they get to explore these disciplines as well as some of the other non-clinical areas. Because the one thing that we would like for students to know is they do not have to be a doctor or a nurse to work in healthcare or to work in a hospital. That there are over 250 opportunities in a hospital setting that they can explore. And not all of them have to be with patients, because not everyone is comfortable working directly with patients. However, we are finding that students at the Health Academy do want to work with patients, especially the elderly and pediatrics.
Wonderful. I know a couple of the students that had quotes in the article. I think one wanted to be a nurse, one wanted to be a respiratory therapist. And so that just was so exciting, and I think the fact that you're an integral part of that is a wonderful part of your story.
As I said, it's really been the best thing I could have done at this stage of my life. Who knew?
It just evolved.
It just evolved.
It just evolved, and you were there to answer the call. Now, I bet some of the teachers that first met you when you started here in America would be a little surprised that you are a leader in the educational system at this point with this program. And if you could share some of your recollections of coming into the American school system and how that shaped your ambition and helped you, with your accomplishments.
My sister and I emigrated with my family here from Italy in 1961. At that time, I was almost 12 years old, and I was in 6th grade in my school in Italy. So when we came here, family members who had been here for many years took us to the Board of Education to be enrolled into the school system in New Britain. And we had to have an assessment done by individuals there. So my educational assessment was done by people who did not speak my language.
Really?
And in those days, there were no services for English language learners or for children with disabilities. You really had to find your own way, or your family had to find its way into the system itself. So based on their assessment, I was placed 1 year behind. So I went back to 5th grade. Learning English was a challenge because, as I said, there were no services in those days. So it was primarily done through our own reading elementary books, children's books, using dictionaries, and going to summer schools. My parents were very much in favor of us continuing our education during the summer so that we could continue to learn how to speak English. When I went to junior high school, I was encouraged by some teachers to take typing because they felt that someday I would be a good secretary. Now, mind you, in those days, I was somewhat chubette, a commonly used term.
I remember, yes.
If you were slightly overweight.
Right.
I also wore very thick glasses. I had a disability. I had polio when I was 2, so I walked with a limp. And I also couldn't speak English very well. So I was somewhat retarded, according to some of the comments that were made in those days. And yet I continued to earn A's, B's, and C's in subjects that I really enjoyed, such as history and sciences, and which were the same grades that most other students earn, even though English is their primary language. And so I had to struggle, and it was a challenge for me to take the courses that I wanted, which were beyond taking typing to become a secretary. And then when it was time to transition from junior high school to high school, I chose college-level courses because I had every intentions of going to college. And my guidance counselors and my teachers also continued to steer me into clerical positions and taking those kinds of courses. At my insistence, I took the courses that I wanted to.
Good for you.
And my guidance counselor eventually signed my transition papers after he saying, "It's your funeral." Words that I will never forget. I graduated from high school with honors. I went on to nursing school. And as a senior in nursing school, I went back to the junior high school on career day with my instructor. And I looked better. I slimmed down. I spoke English very well. I wore contact lenses. I looked different, but I still limped. You can't take that away from me. So when I saw the guidance counselor at career day, I reminded him of who I was and what he said to me, and he didn't remember me.
No.
Of course not. a couple of years later, I had him as a patient, actually. When I graduated from nursing school, I reminded him again, and I told him that I would take very good care of him. And I did, because that was the right thing to do. But it was a challenge because there were multiple dynamics that didn't make me normal. And therefore, if you're not normal, there must be something wrong with you. So that was a challenge in school, in junior high school and high school.
Very much. And what an inspirational story. I know I graduated from Central probably around the same time you did. What other colleges did you go to?
Upon graduation from New Britain General Hospital School of Nursing, which is a 3-year diploma school, I began working as a nurse in the intensive care unit at New Britain General Hospital, which is today the Hospital of Central Connecticut. And then I went on to school. I went on to Central Connecticut State University, which was a college then, and received a BA in psychology. From there, I went on to Western Connecticut State College and received a Bachelor of Science in Nursing. And when the educational system in Connecticut could no longer satisfy my curiosity and my learning needs, I ventured out of state, out of my comfort zone, and I traveled to Houston at the Texas Medical Center, where I became a cardiovascular clinical specialist. And then from there, I moved to New York City, where I lived for 16 years and earned 2 advanced degrees, a master's degree in nursing and a master's degree in healthcare management. And I lived in New York for 16 years. It was a wonderful time of during my adult life, living there. Eventually, circumstances brought me back to a hospital where I started working as a CNA as a high school student.
And we'll talk a little bit about the Hospital for Special Care, which I've recently become aware of and have gotten involved with. And I know some family members had worked at the Hospital for Special Care. I think your grandmother.
My grandmother, Maria, who emigrated in this country in the mid-50s with her family, began to work there as a kitchen aide in the kitchen, as did my uncle, who is today a very successful businessman. And when my sister and I turned 16, we began to learn we learned the culture and the customs of this country, that at 16, young people look for summer jobs or for part-time jobs. My parents did not subscribe to that philosophy. They wanted us to continue their education because they felt that we had many years to work. But when I turned 17, my grandmother said, you might want to explore working with patients at New Britain Memorial Hospital. That was the name of the hospital in those days, New Britain Memorial Hospital. It had a very strange sounding name. So I went over there one day and applied for a job to work with patients. I had no idea what that meant. I was interviewed by the director of nursing, and she said to me that I would be suited in being able to work with patients. And when I come back the following week, she asked me to make sure I had a white uniform and white shoes, and that I could come back on Monday, and I would get to work. I was actually hired for the evening shift to work as a nurse's aide. In those days, in 1967, there was no formal education for certified nursing attendants, which there is today. You basically went in, were partnered with another nurse's aide, and worked along side by side with that person and learned whatever the patient care tasks that had to be done. I worked on the 3 to 10 shift, and we actually lived not too far from the hospital, so I would walk to the hospital, and my father would pick me up at 10 o'clock in the evening. The first few days that I did work, I did not like what I was doing. It was not the kind of work that I wanted to do. So I went home and I told my parents that. And my parents encouraged me to give it 1 week. If I still didn't like it, I didn't have to go back. Well, I went back, not only for that summer, but for several summers after that. In fact, it became the place where I worked during the summer as well as during school vacation. And I began to realize what nurses were doing, and I felt that I really wanted to be like them someday. And so I wanted to go to nursing school, and that's how I was inspired to become a nurse, by my introduction to working with patients as a nursing attendant at New Britain Memorial Hospital.
And your grandmother, Maria.
And my grandmother, Maria, she was the one who actually introduced me there.
And your parents saying, give it a week, right?
And I did, more than a week.
And so when you came back to Connecticut, you were ultimately a management executive person in charge of quality, which is such a pertinent issue for everyone today, all the issues around healthcare. And you back at what was now called the Hospital for Special Care.
Circumstances brought me back here in 1995. I had the opportunity to either find other opportunities in New York or come back to New Britain. And the CEO of the hospital, actually the senior vice president of the hospital at the time, asked me if I wanted to explore a position that was available, and I thought that was rather strange because I wasn't about to leave New York to come back to New Britain. I mean, I really enjoyed being there. But as my parents were getting older, I began to realize that perhaps I should be close by. So I decided to explore the position, and I was hired as the director of one of the several departments, and then I continued to grow in different leadership roles at the hospital, including the Vice President of Quality Improvement Services, and eventually the Vice President of Patient Care Services, and the Chief Nursing Officer. So I came full circles. I came right back where I started, and it has been an incredible experience, and I wouldn't trade it for anything.
And what are the things you value most about the Hospital for Special Care? I mean, you've shared that you have worked in different settings, clinical settings.
Yes, in my years as a staff nurse, as an educator, and as a manager, I've worked in academic medical centers in Connecticut, Texas, and New York City. What I value most about this hospital is that it's a hospital that was originally started as a place where the most vulnerable population would be taken care of. When it opened its doors in 1941, it actually admitted 13 patients from the town farm. These were homeless patients that had no place to go, and they were admitted there. And they were well taken care of by the then founding fathers and mothers. And the hospital has always had a great mission for its community to take care of the most vulnerable population, adult as well as children. And I really respect that. And to this day, they have always strived to make sure that any patient that comes to their door receives the highest quality patient care. And they hire the best staff, and they hire and they really go above and beyond the call of duty to making sure that every patient gets the best possible care. And most of our patients are very challenging to care for. So it cares for the most vulnerable population, and it has remained true to its mission to respond to community needs and to care for those patients that many people don't want to take care of. And I have the highest respect for them.
Thank you. And now expanding to include outpatient services.
Outpatient services have been part of the hospital services for over 20 years, and it has, and it is expanding. It is expanding. The hospital actually was identified last year as one of the top places to work by the Hartford Courant, as well as Connecticut, the Fox News in Connecticut. So it is an amazing place, and it's a magnet. It draws you back. Once you're in there, you can't seem to disconnect.
It certainly seems that in your situation. And the last 2 years have brought you many accolades. Let's see, the YWCA Women in Leadership Special Nominee, Hartford Business Journal finalist as a Healthcare Hero, Hospital Special Care Legacy of Service Award. They named the Simulation Lab after you. Your journey in becoming an advocate and leader, did you have any particular people in your life that really influenced you to become so accomplished?
Well, as nurses, we advocate for our patients 24/7, 365. And there are leaders who advocate for us as well. So I've had the opportunity to work with some really amazing healthcare professionals, both in a hospital setting as well as in academia, who have been my mentors, who have guided me and have allowed me to explore roles and opportunities which were not defined, encouraged me to take risks and to make mistakes. It's okay to make mistakes as long as you don't hurt anyone and you learn from them. And as I became a leader, I encouraged the same in the staff who worked with me. No one ever worked for me. Staff worked with me. I wouldn't do anything that the staff would not be able to do either. If I gave a staff a task to do, I have already done it so that I know that it could be done. So I've had many mentors that have guided me and have led me in the right direction. And I have tried to do the same as I became a leader, because I believe that as leaders, we have the responsibility to influence other people to become leaders as well, and to set the stage for them to be successful. And so I was very fortunate that in my career I had many of them. I also had some what I would call bad bosses.
Okay.
I learned from them as well. I learned what I did not want to be like when I grew up. So they were also good learning opportunities for me. And I tried also to surround myself with positive thinkers. Negative thinkers drain your energy, and they bring you down, and they become toxic. But you learn from that, and you move on, and learn that you want to do something different.
And I can understand, based on your comments and just the opportunities I've had to spend time with you, that you are generally acknowledged for being very gifted in forming professional relationships and personal relationships with students, peers. I understand you were an instructor. I'm sure you were a very popular instructor. And so what advice do you have for women who are looking to make things happen in their professional lives?
Well, I believe that women in general should dream and aspire to be the best that they can be. But however, their dreams and aspirations must be realistic, achievable, and they have to have a plan for success. I do not believe in telling young people in general that you can be anything you want to be as long as you work very hard at it. I don't believe that's realistic. I could never be the Queen of England. I have never lived in England. I could never be the President of the United States. I was not born in this country. But there are many other opportunities available to young women today that were not available to me. The only opportunities available to me in my days were I could be a teacher, a nurse, or a secretary. Whereas today the world is their oyster. They can aspire to be anything that almost anything that they want to be, providing it's realistic, achievable, and that they have a plan for success. And to surround yourself with positive thinkers and people who encourage you and allow you opportunities for discovery and exploration. Look for a mentor who is going to inspire you to think out of the box and to take risks that are reasonable, and who will support you in doing that. For example, many of the I know some of my peers who work with some really bright and best staff. They don't want them to go anywhere. They don't want them to go into another department or explore opportunities in another hospital. I encourage that. I encourage the staff that I work with to explore opportunities in other departments and in other hospitals. Go and see what the other places have to offer. Go see if the grass is better on the other side. If it is, wonderful. I wish you the very best. If it's not and you want to come back, come and talk to me. We'll see what other opportunities there might be for you. I feel that if you do not encourage that, it's selfish on your part, and you're not allowing people to grow to the fullest potential that they can. I really feel that it's important to encourage young people to explore and discover every opportunity that comes their way.
And I'm sure that comes through with the work with the high school program that we first started talking about, right?
Yes, it does.
So important.
There are students now who had no idea what it would be like for them to work in healthcare. As I said, most students only understood healthcare as being a doctor or a nurse and work in a hospital, and that's not what they wanted to do. Through this program, they have learned that there are many more opportunities, such as working in IT, working in building services, in food services, in the finance department, becoming an administrator. So you are still being effective as a leader in a healthcare industry, but you don't have to work directly with patients if that's not what you would like to do. So they're beginning to see that there are many other opportunities for them.
Just broadening their vistas. Now let's talk about reflections you have as you think about your life. And if you could write a letter to your 25-year-old self, some things you might say. Dear Maria.
Well, I would basically say that you should have thought beyond being a teacher, a nurse, or a secretary. But however, nursing opened up for you many doors, many opportunities, and you have achieved more in nursing than you ever thought you could achieve. In fact, I never thought that I could be a nurse executive. I didn't even know what that was in 1968 when I went to nursing school. So I would say dream, have a plan, and and make sure your plan is something that you can achieve and you can be successful at. I also wanted to make sure that I should have told myself that, and I did, not actually at 25, but maybe at 30, that I really wanted to retire at 55 from a structured work environment. But to do so, you must plan for it personally, professionally, and financially. And I did that. It took me a while, but I eventually did it, and I did exactly that, because one of my major goals when I was 25 was that I wanted to be independent and self-sufficient. I needed to take care of myself completely before I could take care of anybody else. And I feel very comfortable that I achieved that. And when I look at Maria at 25, I said to her, you did it.
Wonderful. Now, this show focuses on midlife, which generally starts at 40, common definition. Anything specifically you would say to your 40-year-old self?
Yes. At 40, most people, I believe, and for me it was true, know who they are, know who their authentic self really is. They know who they are, what they're made of, and what they want to do when they grow up. I felt very comfortable at 40 that I had achieved what I wanted to do, which was primarily to be independent and self-sufficient and financially solvent. And I wanted to make sure that I also had a career that satisfied me, satisfied my passion, satisfied my curiosity, and that I was able to explore more opportunities than I ever thought possible at 25. I realized that at 40 there were many more opportunities that I ever knew, that I did not know at 25.
So you kept your antenna up and just kept bringing in all that information.
And I ignored the cynics who said, you can't do this. And the more I was told that I couldn't do something, the more drive I had that I could. So when I see Maria at 40, and I remember that birthday very clearly, I was happy then, and I'm happier now.
Wonderful. And what parting words would you like to share with our audience and viewers?
Well, I hear women say very often that they spend too much time at work at the expense of their families or their personal life. And I really would like to let them, to encourage them to think about not making work their life. Unless work is your own business that you created, that you built, and it's your own, then it probably is your life. But if you work for a company or an organization where you have, a limited number of hours to work, most professionals work way beyond 40 hours. But if you spend 12 hours a day at work, including weekends, miss family vacations or family events, the company doesn't care about that. You really need to resolve those issues on your own. So I really would encourage you to find your passion, but don't give it all of your life if you're working for someone else. And also, as you become a leader, make sure that you influence other leaders, future leaders, and set the stage for their success, and lead with your heart.
Thank you, Maria. Thank you so much for sharing your perspective and your journey and your story, and I'm sure you've inspired many people. Certainly you've inspired me. So I want to thank you again for coming on the show and encourage our viewers to tune in future segments for other fascinating women sharing their stories. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you for sharing.